A lonely rancher bought 3 horses with sacks tied over their heads. Figured it was just another rough deal on a quiet day. But when he pulled the sack off the paint horse, he saw a scar, 2 eyes he could never forget, and a past that refused to stay buried. Every morning for the past 15 years, Emmett Granger woke before the sun, brewed a pot of thick black coffee, and stepped onto the porch of his weathered ranch house. He'd sit in the same creaky chair, wrapped in an old flannel robe that had once belonged to his brother Warren, and stare out across the wide stretch of Wyoming land that had once echoed with laughter, hoofbeats, and the smell of fresh hay. Now it was silent, just brittle fence posts, faded memories, and a scarred man going through motions. Some folks called him a hermit, others a ghost with a heartbeat. But Emmett didn't care. The Bitter Flats weren't built for noise or gossip. They were built for work. And routine was all he had left. The fire had taken everything in one savage night. His brother, the barn, the horses they'd raised from foals. The sheriff called it a tragic accident, faulty lantern. Emmett had accepted it because the alternative, arson, theft, murder, was too ugly to name. He tried not to revisit that night, but some ghosts don't wait for permission. It was mid-morning when the creak of wagon wheels snapped him from his daze. He stepped off the porch and shaded his eyes. A lone figure approached down the dusty trail, driving a rickety wagon pulled by a sway-backed mule, 3 horses tethered behind it. Each of the horses had a burlap sack cinched tight over its head. Emmett's gut clenched. The wagon rolled to a halt just past his gate. The driver spit a wad of tobacco into the dirt and grinned with the kind of smile that made you instinctively check your pockets. He was rail-thin, with boots held together by twine, and the unmistakable smell of rot-gut whiskey wafting off him. "Gee, howdy," the man said, wiping his hands on grimy trousers. "Name's Levi Cutter. Got me a deal for a man like you." Emmett didn't respond right away. His eyes locked on the horses, especially the one in the middle. A paint by the look of the legs. Stocky. Good conformation. But it wasn't the build that sent a chill crawling up his spine. It was the way the animal stood. One hoof slightly forward, weight shifted back, head angled just so. Like a memory trying to claw its way out of the dark. "What's with the sacks?" Emmett asked, his voice low and cautious. Cutter scratched his neck, glancing toward the horizon like he was being watched. "Spook real bad. Can't calm 'em unless they're covered. Lost their last owner in an Indian raid. Fire took the place. These 3 were the only survivors, or so I was told." Emmett stepped closer. His boots crunched against the dry dirt. The paint horse shifted, stomping once. That stance again. That familiar rhythm. Something clawed at the edge of his memory. A flash of a younger man with straw-colored hair whistling in the barn, brushing that same animal under the late summer sun. "What's your price?" Emmett asked, almost despite himself. Cutter's eyes lit up like he'd just hit a flush hand in a poker game. "Well now, these ain't no regular nags. Trained, sturdy. I'd say 200 for the lot." 200. Emmett almost laughed. That was more than he'd spent on anything in 5 years. That money was for feed, winter prep, maybe some new fencing if the wind came in hard next month. But the pull was stronger than logic. Something about that paint horse. It was like an invisible wire had snared his chest and was drawing him forward. He didn't feel like he was making a decision so much as following one already made. "I'll take 'em," he said, pulling a worn leather wallet from his back pocket. Cutter looked like he might faint with relief. His hands trembled as he untied the horses. guiding them slowly into the corral Emmett pointed toward. "Word of advice," Cutter said as he cinched the last rope. "Don't pull those sacks right away. Let 'em settle in. One of 'em bit a man clean through last week." Emmett didn't answer. He was watching the paint horse again, watching how it moved, how it waited. Cutter wasted no time. He was already up on the wagon seat, slapping the reins before Emmett could change his mind. The mule brayed, and the whole ramshackle contraption rattled off in a cloud of dust. By the time the sun dipped low, Emmett had cleared a space in the smaller paddock for the new arrivals. He gave them oats, clean water, and space to breathe. The bay mare and black stallion stuck together, flinching at every sound, but the paint stood apart, watching him, listening. He sat outside the fence, arms draped over his knees, coffee long gone cold. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of dust and old hay, and suddenly, the quiet felt too loud. Screw Cutter's warning. Emmett stood slowly and crossed into the corral. The paint horse didn't move. He approached with careful steps, speaking low like Warren used to. "Easy now. Ain't gonna hurt you." His fingers worked the knot at the base of the sack. It had been tied too tight, almost like whoever did it didn't want it ever coming off. When the last loop gave, Emmett hesitated. His hands were sweating, his heart hammered like a young man's. Then he pulled. The burlap slid free, and the world stopped. The horse's eyes blinked against the light, one dark brown, the other ice blue. A long white scar curved from the brow to the muzzle, jagged and unmistakable. Emmett staggered back a step, his breath caught in his throat. "Zeke," he said. Not a question, a whisper, a name carried on wind and grief. Zeke, Warren's paint, the one who used to follow him around like a dog, the one Emmett himself had helped break as a colt, the horse that had been declared dead in the barn fire 15 years ago. But Zeke was standing right in front of him, older, scarred, but very much alive. And suddenly, the questions he'd buried for a decade and a half came screaming back to life. Someone had lied. The fire wasn't what it seemed, and Emmett Granger had just bought back a piece of a past he thought was long gone. Only now, the past was looking straight at him, with one blue eye and a scar full of secrets. The night air hung heavy on Emmett's lungs, thick with the scent of dry earth and something older, something he hadn't felt in years. He didn't go back inside after pulling the sack from Zeke's head. Instead, he sat on the corral fence until his joints stiffened, staring into the dark where the horses paced, shadows moving in silence. Zeke had laid down once, close to the gate, resting his head in that old, familiar way, like Warren used to say he did when he was at peace. But Emmett felt anything but peace. As the eastern horizon began to pale with morning light, he poured himself another cup of coffee, black as coal, and returned to the paddock. The chill clung to him, but it was nothing compared to the cold turning in his gut. He couldn't put it off any longer. There were still 2 horses left with sacks tied tight around their heads, like secrets someone was hoping would stay buried. He approached the bay mare first. She was skittish, shifting her weight from hoof to hoof, ears pinned back. "Easy now," he said softly. "If you're who I think you are, we've been through worse than this." The knot was tight, too tight for any good reason. As he pulled the burlap free, his breath caught. Willow. She blinked slowly at him, head tilting just slightly like she used to when Warren talked to her. Her muzzle was grayer now, a bit sunken, but her deep brown eyes were as clear and gentle as the last time he'd seen them. A soft whicker escaped her, almost shy. His legs buckled, He had to grab the fence rail to stay upright. No, no damn way, he muttered, though the truth was already thudding in his chest. He reached a hand toward her, and she stepped forward without hesitation, brushing her nose against his coat like she'd just come home from a long trail. Tears prickled behind his eyes, hot and unexpected. Next was the black stallion. Emmett's hands trembled as he untied the last sack. He didn't even speak, couldn't. When the burlap slipped away, the horse let out a proud snort and stamped the dirt, tossing his head. Onyx, God Almighty. Warren had raised him from a colt, said he was going to build a whole bloodline off him. The stallion had a fire in him, even now, older and worn. Scars traced his flanks. Rope burns around the pasterns. Someone had used him hard. But beneath all of it, that fire still burned. Emmett didn't realize he was shaking until he tried to step back and nearly stumbled into the fence. All three of them. Right there in front of him. The horses Warren lived for. The horses Sheriff Kincaid had told him burned alive in the barn. Emmett gritted his teeth. His jaw clenched so hard it ached. They hadn't died. They'd been taken. And if someone had stolen the horses, that fire 15 years ago hadn't just been some damn accident. He leaned on the gate, knuckles white on the wood, breathing heavy through his nose. The memory surged back, hot and bright. That morning, riding back from the north fence, the sky painted with smoke, the scream of livestock, the way the flames chewed through the barn rafters like dry kindling, and Warren, dear God. Warren. His voice swallowed in the heat. Emmett had made it just in time to see Sheriff Kincaid already on scene, standing calm like he'd been waiting. Claimed he got there early, claimed it was a knocked-over lantern, no need to investigate further. The man barely blinked. Emmett had believed him. Or maybe he'd just been too broken to think. But now, as the light rose and touched the scar on Zeke's brow, the pieces fell like dominoes. That fire was no accident. Somebody took the horses, and to do that, they had to kill Warren. His hands balled into fists. His breath came short and hard. 15 years of guilt. 15 years of thinking maybe he should have been there. That maybe it really was just a freak accident. But someone had taken advantage of that chaos. Someone who wanted the horses more than they feared justice. But why? What were they worth that was so valuable? A creak of saddle leather broke the silence. He turned fast, rifle already half raised, instincts waking after a long sleep. A lone rider was coming up the trail. Woman. Rode like she'd been doing it since birth, balanced, calm, confident. She dismounted before her horse stopped moving, boots hitting dirt with a quiet thud. Her coat was worn and dusty. A pistol sat high on her right hip, hand resting on it casually, like it had been part of her for years. She looked older than he remembered, leaner, sharper, but the eyes were the same. "Emmett Granger?" she called. He kept his stance, rifle not quite lowered. "Who's asking?" "Name's Claire Whitlow." The name nearly took the breath from him. Claire. Warren's girl. She'd vanished right after the funeral, left nothing but a note and a broken trail. He'd looked for her for weeks. She was gone, like the wind had taken her. Now she stood in front of him like she'd never left. "I've been tracking those horses for 15 damn years," she said. Zeke whinnied from the paddock behind him. Claire's eyes shifted toward the sound. The mask cracked. She stepped past Emmett without a word and approached the fence. When she saw Zeke's face, her whole body faltered. She reached out and touched the top rail like it might be the only thing keeping her upright. I didn't believe it was true, she whispered. Thought it was just another ghost story. But he's here. Emmett took a step closer. You knew they were alive? She shook her head. Not back then. I believed what they told us. I thought they died with Warren. Until 6 months ago. I picked up a rumor in South Dakota. A trader claimed he moved a horse with a crescent mark and one blue eye. I followed every lead since. Emmett studied her. Her voice was stronger now, but her eyes, they were tired. Not just from the trail, from holding grief too long. I bought him off a man named Levi Cutter, Emmett said. Came down the ridge just yesterday morning. Claire gave a bitter snort. Middleman. He sells what others are too careful to move directly. But he didn't steal them. Someone else did. Who? She didn't answer right away, just kept staring at Zeke. Then she looked up at Emmett, and there was no softness left in her expression. Sheriff Tom Kincaid. The name hit like a fist to the ribs. Emmett's mouth went dry. You sure? I'm sure, she said flatly. He's been stealing prize horses for years. Ranches go up in smoke, records vanish. Kincaid shows up first and closes the case. Sound familiar? His mind reeled. The sheriff. The one man he'd trusted to tell him the truth that day. Claire turned toward him. I have proof. A witness. And if Cutter moved these horses, then Kincaid knows they're missing. Emmett looked back toward the paddock. 15 years of silence. Until now. Then we'd best not waste time, he said. And Claire nodded. No, because the man who stole them, who killed Warren, he'll come looking. The house smelled like dust and silence when Claire stepped inside. Emmett watched her scan the space, eyes pausing on the crooked photo of Warren above the mantel, the frayed rug beneath the table, the dish rack still drying from the night before. She looked like she was trying to breathe through memory, like it hit too fast and too sharp to swallow all at once. He hasn't changed, she said, touching the edge of Warren's picture. He's the only thing that hasn't, Emmett replied. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same place Emmett had eaten alone every day for the last 15 years. But today was different. Today, truth sat in the chair across from him, and it had Claire's voice. She pulled a worn leather notebook from her saddlebag and slid it across the table. His name was Jed Holloway, she said. Used to ride with Kincaid. Ran stock, torched barns, covered tracks. Got out when his son got sick. Claimed he found God in the end. Maybe he did. This was his confession. Emmett opened it slowly. The pages were yellowed, creased at the corners, filled with tight, slanted handwriting, names, dates, ranch locations, codes, and brands. Near the middle of the book, he stopped. March 12th, 1908, Ward Ranch. 3 head taken. Paint, bay, black. Owner delayed. 1 casualty. His stomach turned. He called Warren a casualty, Emmett muttered. Claire nodded, her jaw tight. Jed said Kincaid was supposed to wait. Said Warren wasn't supposed to be there. But he showed up early. Caught them trying to lead the horses out before the fire was lit. Emmett closed his eyes. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Just sat there, fists clenched on the tabletop. He fought back, Claire continued. Jed said your brother tried to stop them. Kincaid shot him, dumped him near the well, then lit the fire anyway. A silence settled over the kitchen like falling dust. Heavy, final. I lived 15 years thinking I left the lantern burning, Emmett said softly. Thinking I was the one who failed him. You didn't, Claire said. You just believed the wrong man. He opened his eyes and looked at her. And what about you? Where did you go? She looked away, her voice quiet. I ran. Couldn't breathe in this house anymore. Couldn't stand the sound of his name on people's lips while they praised the sheriff who murdered him. I left because I couldn't stay. And I stayed gone because I had to learn how to fight back. Emmett didn't say anything for a long while. Outside, Zeke let out a soft snort. A breeze shifted the kitchen curtains. Claire picked up the journal and flipped to the last few pages. There's more, she said. This wasn't just about your ranch. Kincaid's been doing this for decades. Jed listed at least 7 other properties. Isolated ranches, small outfits, no family left behind to ask questions. Emmett stood and paced to the window, looking out at the horses. How'd he pull it off? He gets tipped off on bloodlines, picks valuable stock, waits until he knows the rancher's alone or vulnerable, burns the place down, makes it look like a freak accident. Then he splits the horses through a trail of middlemen. By the time they show up again, they've been rebranded, repurposed, sometimes even renamed. Emmett turned to her. So why bring this to me now? Claire met his eyes. Because these 3, Zeke, Willow, Onyx, they're living proof. You've got what no one else did. Survivors. And Kincaid doesn't know who has them yet. Emmett's heart kicked harder. But he'll find out. Claire nodded. And when he does, he'll come. He looked back toward the paddock, jaw tight. Zeke stood facing the house, head high, as if he understood every word. Then we don't wait for him, Emmett said. We finish what Warren started. That afternoon, they combed through Emmett's barn. Tucked behind old hay bales and rusted tack boxes, Claire found what she'd hoped to. A crate of old ledgers, untouched since the fire. And in the bottom drawer of Warren's desk, a photograph-weathered, half-burned butt showing a young Warren beside Onyx, Zeke, and Willow, each clearly marked with their original brands. Claire smiled as she traced the image. This is enough to prove where they came from. If we can match these markings to Jed's notes, we've got a paper trail. They were still going through documents when Emmett's dogs began barking. He stepped onto the porch, eyes squinting at the setting sun. Dust on the ridge. 6 riders. No banners. No badges. But there was no mistaking the figure at the front. Broad shoulders, wide hat, and that familiar crooked posture. Tom Kincaid. Emmett felt a chill wrap around his ribs. They're here, he said. Claire appeared beside him, pistol already in her hand. I counted 6. They're not coming for coffee. Kincaid's posse rode in slow, careful, spreading out like wolves around a wounded deer. When they reached the edge of the yard, Kincaid dismounted first. He looked older, fatter around the middle, but his eyes still carried that same pale emptiness Emmett remembered from the day of the fire. Well now, Kincaid called out, voice like spoiled honey. Looks like you picked up some company, Granger. Emmett stepped forward, rifle in hand, but still down. They're mine, fair and legal. Bought them yesterday. Got the bill of sale if you care to see it. Kincaid's smile didn't reach his eyes. Funny thing. Those horses were reported stolen out of Fremont County. Suppose I'll be taking them off your hands. Claire stepped out beside Emmett, eyes locked on the sheriff. You torched that barn. You killed Warren Ward. One of Kincaid's men twitched toward his holster, but the sheriff raised a hand to still him. Well, damn, he said slowly. Didn't expect to see you again, Miss Whitlow. Thought you'd learned your lesson about digging up the past. She didn't blink. The past's about to dig you a grave, Tom. Emmett felt the shift. The air had gone still. Even the horses were silent. Kincaid tilted his head. You sure you want to go down this road? Claire took a step forward. I've got Jed Holloway's journal. I've got sketches. I've got witness testimony. You come one step closer to those horses, and you'll have a federal warrant on your doorstep tomorrow. Kincaid's smile vanished. His voice dropped into gravel. You think anyone out here gives a damn about federal warrants? We handle our business locally. He turned to his men. Take 'em. The words barely left his mouth before Emmett raised his rifle. Claire cocked the hammer on her revolver, 6 against 2. But Emmett wasn't the man he used to be. He was something sharper now, and Warren's blood was still soaking the soil beneath his boots. Time seemed to hang still for one taut, breathless moment. Then the world snapped. The crack of Claire's revolver split the evening air. The closest deputy reeled back with a scream, a burst of red flaring from his shoulder as he crashed to the ground beside the paddock. Emmett dove behind the old water trough, just as bullets ripped into the porch posts above his head, splinters exploding into his hair and shirt collar. His rifle kicked hard against his shoulder as he fired twice, the first shot going wide, the second dropping another man in the dirt near the fence line. Move! Claire shouted from behind the woodpile as another round hissed past her cheek. The ranch erupted into chaos. Horses screamed and kicked in the paddock, hooves thundering against the fence rails. Zeke spun in circles, head tossing, nostrils flaring wide. Willow bolted to one corner, rearing in panic. Onyx slammed his massive body against the fence again and again, desperate to escape the storm of violence erupting around them. Emmett reloaded, ducking low as more shots cracked through the ranch yard. The dust stung his eyes. His lungs burned. But something inside him, something old, buried, and savage, had come roaring back to life. 15 years of pain, 15 years of silence. It all lit up behind his eyes like wildfire. Across the yard, Claire moved like lightning. She darted from the woodpile to the barn, sliding behind the doorframe and returning fire with sharp, surgical precision. She hit another man in the leg. He screamed and dropped his weapon, crawling behind a trough. Emmett covered her with another burst from his rifle, forcing a fourth man to flatten against the far fence. And then came the shift. Zeke. The paint horse reared high, nearly clearing the top rail. With a violent slam of his hooves, he cracked the corral gate open. The latch gave. The gate swung wide. All 3 horses exploded out into the yard. But instead of fleeing, Zeke wheeled hard and charged straight for the man trying to flank Claire from the right. The deputy barely had time to scream before Zeke barreled into him, knocking him 10 feet backward into the side of the barn with a sickening crunch. The man's rifle flew from his hands and skidded across the dirt. Willow and Onyx followed, not in panic, but with purpose, hooves kicking, heads down, scattering the remaining attackers into disarray. The tide had turned. Emmett used the chaos to sprint from his cover toward the porch. He passed the body of the first deputy Claire had shot, the man moaning softly, bleeding out into the dust. Another lay slumped against the fence, breathing shallowly, eyes wide with shock. Only 2 were left standing now, and one of them was Kincaid. The sheriff had taken cover behind Emmett's porch rail, his pistol gripped tight, breathing hard through clenched teeth. His vest was soaked through with sweat, the smug confidence he'd worn earlier gone like vapor. "You should have stayed quiet, Granger," Kincaid snarled. "You could have lived out your last days without anyone bothering you." Emmett kept his rifle low as he circled wide, moving through the blind spot the horses had created. "You burned my brother alive," he said, then smiled at me while I buried him. "I did what needed doing," Kincaid hissed, "and you're next." The click of Claire's revolver echoed from behind. "Not today," she said. Kincaid spun toward the voice, and Claire fired. The bullet punched through his shoulder with a burst of blood. He screamed and dropped to one knee, his gun tumbling from his hand. Emmett rushed forward, rifle raised. But another man burst from behind the tool shed, charging him with a raised revolver. They crashed together in the dirt. Emmett grappled with the younger deputy, stronger, faster, but less desperate. They rolled through the dust, fists swinging, blood smearing the ground beneath them. The man got a knee into Emmett's ribs, knocking the wind out of him. The world spun. But then Claire was there again. Her boot slammed into the deputy's temple, sending him sprawling. "That's enough," she said, voice steady and cold. The man coughed once and didn't move again. Emmett pushed himself up slowly, ribs aching, head ringing. The yard was silent now, save for the wind and the soft, nervous breathing of the horses. 4 men down, 1 unconscious, 1 groaning in pain. And Kincaid, slumped against the porch steps, clutching his bleeding arm, his face contorted in a mix of pain and rage. "You think this changes anything?" He spat. "You think taking me down brings your brother back? I've got friends in Cheyenne. Hell, I've got friends in D.C. This'll all blow over." Claire stepped closer, pulling something from her saddlebag. A small, weathered book, Jed Holloway's journal. She dropped it at Kincaid's feet. "You remember Jed?" she asked. "Because he remembered you. Every horse, every name, every ranch you burned down." Kincaid's face turned pale. "You're bluffing," he said. She flipped to a page. "Ward Ranch, March 12th, 3 head taken, 1 casualty." Kincaid closed his eyes. "He tried to stop you," Emmett said, voice low. "You killed him for trying to protect his stock, for trying to protect his future." "And you let me bury him," Emmett added, stepping forward, voice breaking. "You stood over his body and lied to my face." Claire crouched down beside Kincaid, her eyes hard as iron. "And now you're going to answer for all of it," she said. "You've got no proof I lit that fire," he muttered. Claire's voice dropped to a whisper. "Jed saw you. He saw you shoot Warren. He saw you drag his body. He saw you light the match. And before he died, he told me everything. And we've already sent copies of that journal to the territorial judge, the papers, and the federal marshals." Kincaid let out a hollow breath and slumped lower. Defeated. Broken. The past had caught up. Zeke stood nearby, blood flecks on his hooves, chest heaving. He looked toward Emmett and let out a low, tired snort. Not fear, not panic. Pride. Emmett walked toward him, placed a hand on his neck, and gave a single nod. "You did good, boy." That night, after they'd tied Kincaid and his surviving men in the tack room under lock and key, Emmett and Claire sat under the stars, their backs against the porch steps, shoulders brushing. The ranch was quiet again, but not empty. Not anymore. Claire broke the silence first. "Think they'll come for him?" "They'll come," Emmett said. "This time we've got the truth, and a witness with hooves and a scar that don't lie." She looked out over the paddock, where Zeke, Willow, and Onyx stood peacefully grazing in the moonlight. The breeze caught Zeke's mane, flicking it like a banner in the wind. 15 years, she whispered. 15 years chasing shadows. Emmett took a slow breath. "And now?" She looked at him. "I think I'm ready to stop running." 3 days later, Emmett Granger stood where he hadn't stood in 15 years, in front of Warren's grave. The wooden cross was weather-worn, the carved letters barely legible under layers of dust and Wyoming sun. But he could still read his brother's name, could still feel his voice echo in the wind, the same wind that blew through the valley the morning they loaded Sheriff Tom Kincaid into the federal marshal's wagon. Kincaid hadn't said much after the fight. There wasn't much left to say. Claire handed over Jed Holloway's journal and the letter from a federal witness protection officer who'd long suspected corruption in Fremont County. The evidence was overwhelming. Dates, signatures, photos, and the undeniable presence of 3 living horses once declared dead. Justice hadn't come swift, but it had come. Kincaid was now sitting in a high-security cell in Cheyenne, awaiting formal sentencing. The charges were stacking up faster than the ink could dry. Murder, conspiracy, arson, livestock theft, obstruction of justice. He wouldn't see open sky again for the rest of his life, and it hadn't ended there. News of the Bitter Flats conspiracy broke across 3 counties. Ranchers who'd once been silenced by fear began to speak. Fires long dismissed as tragic accidents were now being re-examined. Family names that once held power in dusty town halls were now facing subpoenas and federal investigations. What began with 3 stolen horses became a reckoning for an entire region. The papers called it the Horse Trail Scandal. But Emmett didn't care about headlines. He cared about the silence finally breaking. He knelt by the grave and brushed the dust from the carved name. The ground was warm beneath his palm. "I'm sorry it took so long," he whispered. "I should have known you didn't just knock over a lantern. You were too careful for that. You always were." A boot crunched softly behind him. Claire stepped beside him and crouched down, placing a folded piece of paper at the base of the cross. Jed's journal page, the one that mentioned Warren's name, the one that called his death a casualty. "We buried the truth with him once," she said. "Now we bury it with him, where it belongs." They stood together for a long while, letting the quiet say what words couldn't. In the paddock behind them, Zeke, Willow, and Onyx grazed peacefully in the warm afternoon sun. They looked different now, coats brushed, bellies full, spirits lighter. Emmett swore they moved freer, like a weight had been lifted from their backs. "He would have been proud of them," Claire said. "They fought harder than I ever did," Emmett replied, watching Zeke lift his head and glance toward them. That crescent mark caught the light, shining like a brand from the heavens. "They weren't just horses," Claire said. "They were witnesses, and they waited until someone was finally ready to listen." Emmett turned to her. "What'll you do now?" Claire didn't answer at first, just let the wind run through her fingers. "I've been running for 15 years, she said. "From grief, from ghosts, from the life Warren and I were supposed to have. I'm tired of running, Emmett. I want to stay. If that's something you'd be all right with." He studied her, the weathered leather of her coat, the lines the sun had etched near her eyes, the strength in her voice that hadn't dulled one bit. And beneath it all, the girl Warren had loved, still standing tall. "I think he'd want them to be happy," Emmett said. "All of them." She smiled. "Then let's see if we can rebuild this place. Not the way it was, the way it should have been." They walked back toward the house together, slow and quiet, the kind of silence that settles after a storm's past. Zeke watched them go, then gave a soft, contented nicker that carried across the field like a blessing. He trotted once around the paddock, his head high, then returned to grazing beside Willow and Onyx. No more fences to break, no more sacks to hide behind. The land was peaceful again, but no longer silent. Weeks later, folks from town started stopping by, first out of curiosity, then out of solidarity. Some came with stories, others with tears. Most just wanted to see the horses that had started it all. Zeke didn't mind the visitors. He'd stand near the fence and let children stroke his neck. Adults marvel at his eyes. He was calm, patient, but never tame. There was still something wild in him, something proud. One afternoon, Emmett tacked a brass plaque to the corral gate. Zeke, Willow, and Onyx, the ones who came home. He and Claire kept the ranch small, manageable. They didn't need much. Just good grass, honest days, and the kind of sleep that only comes when your ghosts have finally found their peace. Some nights, Emmett sat on the porch with Claire beside him, coffee in one hand and silence in the other. He'd look out across the paddock at the hills beyond and feel something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. It came slow, like spring in bitter flats. But it came. And every now and then, when the wind shifted just right, he'd swear he could hear Warren's voice on it, laughing, shouting, calling the horses in at dusk. He didn't chase it anymore. He just listened. Because sometimes justice doesn't come with sirens or courtrooms. Sometimes it rides in on 4 hooves, with one blue eye and a scar full of stories. And sometimes it waits 15 years for the right man to listen. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a thumbs up. It truly helps us share these powerful narratives with more people. And we'd love to hear from you. What part of Emmett's story resonated most with you? Have you ever witnessed a quiet act of heroism or seen justice prevail against the odds? Share your thoughts and memories in the comments below. Your insights enrich our community. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more authentic tales of courage, tradition, and triumph from the heartland. And if you know someone who would appreciate this journey, please share this video with them. Thank you for watching and for being a part of our storytelling family.